Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wait. I was gonna try to think of a different song, because I feel like I sing the same songs every single time, or the same. We usually do Beauty and the Beast, or Be Our Guest. Wednesday show. The more you know. La 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 la. And we've done a lot of Hunchback of Notre Dame. I don't know if you can hear me, or if you're even there. But I feel like we need a new song to kind of go through and add to. If you were ever with us when we first started doing the Wednesday show, we actually used to have a different song every single week. Like literally every week, I would come up with a different theme song to the tune of a Disney song. And it would be talking about how we're going to be talking about Disney. So yeah, fun times. That's just me rambling to myself. Hello, Frank fam. Side note. So I've had a few people who've told me that they've been having issues with the comments or typing comments in there. I went through and I switched some stuff up today, so hopefully things are going through now, but I'm not positive it's going through now. But hopefully things have been fixed. Maybe, I don't know. It's been driving me crazy too, because I want everyone to be able to feel included and have it so they can, join in on all the fun. But right now it sounds like some people have not been getting all the fun, and that's disappointing. So hopefully people are being able to fix it, and if you're not, I apologize. I will put another thing in to... Oh, here we go. Here. Not everyone's things are coming through in the chat. There we go. We've placed it in. We're doing a live feed, and we're also in a live support right now with StreamYard, the ones that we use to do the broadcast. And now that we said that, it looks like we've got some people who are out there actually writing to me about it. Yep, my friend Eric just wrote. He said still doesn't work. Oh, here we go. This is the start of today's episode is brought to you by the chat room. Here, so we're on there with Louie. Louie says, "Hi, Brent Dodge. This is Louie. How can I help?" Here, let's type it again. I've had some people say that they are not, or that their comments are not going through when they type on both Facebook and YouTube. Not sure why, though. Any help, Louie? We'll see. We'll see what happens. Louie is now a part of our show today. So for those of you guys who are just joining us, so some people have been talking about how they've been having issues with typing things into the chat, and then it's not popping up for anyone to see. So we are now in the customer service chat room while we're also doing the show here. So, Louie's typing right now. Come on, Louie. Here's how to change your live streaming settings to public on Facebook. So you can start seeing the comments in the studio. Okay, but I can see some comments. I can see some. Oh, I'm typing faster than I'm thinking. I can see some comments, but for some reason, not every ones are going through. Okay, this is the greatest intro that we've ever had. All right, we're gonna shrink that down. Oh, wait, hello, hey, howdy, hey, hi. His name is Louie, unfortunately not Bluey. Oh, we just got another chat that came through. He says, He says, for both for both, unfortunately, but at the same time, other comments are coming through. I feel like we're doing like a. I've had a few people. I'm typing ahead of myself again. I have people for the past few weeks, while others have not had any issues. This is I've I've never so in the studio at the very bottom. I've gone to the having issues thing before, where you like submit your own thing, but then on when you're actually on the studio, which we're at right now, there's a thing down here that says having issues on my side. On your side, it's probably just something else. It's probably like www like a Disney World website. I was gonna say, but I couldn't think. Strange. So comments are showing up at both destinations, but some are not coming through to StreamYard. Is that the case? People who are having problems, if you can send me a private message. I'll put down for. That's how they made it sound. Okay. So springtime race weekend is next weekend. Okay. So let's start doing the show. We're going to continue talking to Louie here. Maybe we'll ask Louie questions about Disney while we're at it. Does anyone have any questions they want to throw to Louie? How do we know if you are seeing our messages? I can see your messages right now. StreamYard. StreamYard is what I use to do the broadcast. So that way I can broadcast both on Facebook and YouTube, because some people want to broadcast just on Facebook. Some people just want on YouTube. And this way I can actually do both. That's why if you're ever on the show, if you look like right below your name here, you can see the little YouTube logo below your name. That means you're watching on YouTube. But then if you look right here, if you look below Christine's name, you can see the Facebook logo, because that means she's watching and typing on Facebook. We'll do. All right. So he says he can possibly help me out later on. So I'm going to send him a message later on to hopefully be able to figure out exactly what's going on. Oh, wait. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to the 711th episode of the Wednesday Show. Today is April 5th, 2023. I'm your host, as always, Brent Dodge. Hello. Today we're going to be going through and continuing to talk all about the Disney 100 celebration. Louie is writing it again. Louie, thanks, Louie. He says, I'm happy to help whenever you get the chance. Thanks, Louie. We appreciate you. But of course, before we get to that, let's talk about our news for the week. First off, thank you everyone who's been joining us for our Saturday in the Park. If you don't already know, every single Saturday right on my YouTube channel, we do a live broadcast from someplace found throughout the Walt Disney World Resort. You never know where we're going to be broadcasting from, but I promise you we are going to be coming to you live from Disney every Saturday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. I did go through and play the Easter egg hunt today over at Epcot. However, I think I'm at Epcot this coming up weekend, and I like some of the other eggs. So I'm thinking we might go back there and go again. So possibly this coming up Saturday, we might be doing the Easter egg hunt around the World Showcase. Once again, even though I know where all the things are, but we'll take you around and point that out. Also, in addition to that, we will also be having it. So tomorrow's YouTube video will be focusing on that egg hunt as well. Speaking of which, if you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe. Let's check out our number for today. And if, as always, if we continue going through and getting more subscribers as we go through here tonight, we will have it so we go into extra innings tonight. We are starting off with a whopping 2,722 subscribers, which is pretty exciting because it was at 2,720 just a few hours ago. So thank you to those two new people who are joining us. Right now, our video from earlier today is taken off, and then also my short is taken off as well. So thank you everyone who's been going out and watching these videos every single day. We do have a brand new video. So make sure you join us every single day over on YouTube for our shorts and our full video. And of course, as always, tonight's episode is sponsored by, I hit the wrong button, by It's All About the Mouse Travel Jazz Hands. Make sure you stop by it'sallaboutthemousetravel.com for all of your Disney travel needs. All their services are absolutely positively 100% free. So make sure you book with them for your next Disney vacation. Okay, let's get to the show for the night. Now, if you guys joined us a few weeks ago, we did start off our brand new segment talking about the Disney 100 years. If you were not there with us, well, let me explain what it is exactly. So what we're going to be doing throughout the course of the next year in celebration of the Disney 100 years, every now and then we're going to have an episode where we talk about specific things that happen in Disney history in specific years. But to make it more exciting, to kind of have it so we shake things up, we're not going to go in chronological order from 1923 all the way to 2023, but instead we are going to be going to you, the followers, the listeners, the hello, my friends, in the chat room, to have it so you guys go through and give us a year between 1923 and 2023. And when you give us the year, we're going to go through and talk a little bit about that specific year. Now, last time we did this, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have had 7 years go through so far, which means that we still have a whole lot of years left to go. So I am looking for people in the comments below. Start throwing your years out that you want us to cover. If it is a year that we've already done, I will let you know, and we'll skip it and go to a different year instead. So start throwing out those years into the comments below, anywhere between 1923 and 2023. And we're going to go here to our thing. I'm not going to lie, I was putting down all these numbers the other day into the book, all the different years, and I was very disappointed because no one yet has chosen a year that I was alive during. We have gone 1976 is the latest year that we've covered so far, so we have not gone into anything from 1984 to current times. Oh, but that is about to change because we have 5 years that have come through here, and out of those 5 years, I was alive for 2 of them. So let's start us off in 1965. 1965. Let's cross off number 1965 here so we know not to come back to it again. Well, I guess we can always talk about it again. Okay. So 1965 is kind of a weird time. Oh, wait, I hit the wrong button. Let me get to my my notes about 1965 here. So 1965 is kind of at one of those weird peaks of Disney history because we don't really have a lot going on. There's a lot of stuff that happened right before 1965, and there's a lot of stuff that happened right after 1965. However, 1965 just kind of sat in the middle of 2 amazing years. 1964, we had the start of the 1964 World's Fair, which is world famous for being world famous. No, it's the Jungle Cruise. But in 1964, we had the start of the World's Fair. Now, the World's Fair, as we've talked about in the past, and I know we're talking about 64 right now, but we're actually talking about 1965, but I had to explain 1964 to get to 1965. So in 1964, we had the New York World's Fair, and that would run into 1965. And at the end of it, they decided that they were going to open up some brand new attractions over at Disneyland. Now, remember, this is about 6 years before we would actually get to the Walt Disney World aspect of our history lesson. So right now, we're just focusing on our West Coast neighbor. Hi, Disneyland. I am actually facing the... Wait, am I facing... No. Hi, Disneyland. I'm facing away from Disneyland. Disneyland's behind me. So when the 1964 World's Fair would conclude in 1965, and then, of course, sometimes in 1966 as well, it was a long fair. It wasn't just 1 year, but that's not what we're really talking about right now. So when this fair would conclude, Disney decided that what they're going to do is bring a few of their brand new innovations or anything over to Disneyland. So naturally, they decided that what they're going to do is going to bring over some of their most popular things that they had at Disneyland, which was pretty much all of it. So in 1965, we would have It's a Small World. It's a small world after all. Make its way over to Disneyland. In addition to It's a Small World, we also had great moments with Mr. Lincoln, the Carousel of Progress, and then the Ford Motor Speedway would be opening up kind of as a similar attraction, but in reality, a completely different attraction altogether. So in 1965, we also got not the Ford Motor Speedway, but the People Mover over at Disneyland. So with the brand new People Mover, it also kind of introduced the idea of the Omni Mover track. We kind of had a little bit during the 1964 World's Fair with the addition of the Ford Motor Speedway. But in addition to that, we would start to have it so more pioneering aspects would move forward with what we could see in the future when it came to Disneyland attractions. So after that, we would get things like the Haunted Mansion, Omni Mover, and most of the Disneyland opening day attractions, maybe not most, but things like Peter Pan's Flight was an Omni Mover. When you go to Disneyland, it's not an Omni Mover. So this entire thing started happening over in Disneyland in 1965, mainly due to the fact that the year before, we had the 1964 World's Fair. In addition to that, we also had it so we would go through the brand new scenes over in the Disneyland Railroad, which featured the dinosaurs of the past, which I've always loved. I think that's just one of the greatest additions over in Disneyland. And it kind of blows my mind at one point that they didn't have those additions at one point or another, but that's not what we're talking about. In addition to 1965, we didn't really have any main big movies come out, whether live action or animated. However, one of the big things that did happen was Walt Disney was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Lyndon B. Johnson. And that's going to wrap up 1965. Let's go on to our next one here. Oh, yeah, we're getting to the ones where I was alive. Yes, 1994. 1994 was one of those years that I vividly remember. Like, I vividly remember, mainly due to the fact that I can still remember going to the movie theater to watch a brand new film that would come out in 1994 called The Lion King. Now, The Lion King would become one of the biggest films of all time. That's like an understatement. It was the biggest live action, or not live action, the biggest animated film of all time when it was released back not in 2004, in 1994. So when it came out in 1994, it became one of the biggest movies of all time, and it became an immediate hit and a cultural icon. Now, with this edition of The Lion King, we had a huge presence of The Lion King making its way to Disney parks around the world, including different stage shows in Disneyland and at Walt Disney World. We had The Legend of the Lion King, which opened up that year. And then in addition to that stuff, it wasn't just Lion King. Like 1994 was a massive year for movies when it comes to Disney. And then we're going to get into the theme parks and all the behind the scenes stuff too, because there are some other things that would happen in 1994, which are kind of mind blowing when you think about all the stuff that would happen. Later on that year, we had a mind-blowing fact, and I think this is one of the most mind-blowing facts because I think it's still to this day the only time in history that this happened. So later in the year, we got a brand new movie called The Santa Claus that came out, starring Tim Allen. When that film came out, Tim Allen was the star of, obviously, The Santa Claus, which was the #1 movie at the box office. The same exact week, he was also in the #1 television series in television, which was Home Improvement. And at the same time, his book was out, and it was the top-selling book that week. So in that 1 week, it's the only time in history that I know of. I could be wrong, but I know at that point, it was the first time in history where one person had the #1 movie, the #1 book, and the #1 TV show all in the same week. Mind-boggling. Like that, I think that's really mind-boggling. And finally, also in that year, we got something that most people complain about to this day, and just because of a different aspect. So if you were watching things on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook yesterday, you may have seen, or maybe it was 2 days ago. It was 2 days ago. You would have seen an announcement by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson talking about how they're making a live-action Moana. Now, a lot of people go through and they kind of talk about live-action films and how they're not a big fan of these live-action remakes. However, in 1994, it was actually something that was pretty exciting because in 1994, we got our first live-action remake, which would have been The Jungle Book. Now, in The Jungle Book, we had it so it kind of went through pretty much a shot-by-shot remake of the original Jungle Book. Fun fact, the kid who plays Mowgli in The Jungle Book is now the dad in the new Doogie Mahalo Aloha MD show That's on Disney Plus. Great show. If you've not watched it, it's a great show. Make sure you go check it out. But the dad that's in that, he is the same kid who played Mowgli. Mind-boggling when I found that out too. I've said mind-boggling like 17 times tonight. If you're doing a drinking game tonight, mind-boggling is the word that you want to focus on. So that was all that happened in the movie aspect of 1994. However, that is just the beginning because there are so many more things that happened in 1994. So let's get to those things as well. Let me just pull up my notes here. Now, we're going to start with some things that were massive changes for the Disney company. If you remember, we've talked about it several times in the past about the big surge of what's going to happen with Disney animation back in the 1980s. Now, in the 1980s, Disney animation was just kind of it was a dying art. Not many people wanted to go see animated films, much less animated films by the Disney company. It was kind of slowly fading away, and things just were not looking good. And eventually what would happen is Michael Eisner, along with Frank Wells, would come into the company and bring brand new life into the entire animation department. And they pretty much told them, hey, we're going to put you off lot if you guys aren't doing a good job, if you're not bringing in movies, if you're not bringing in money. Unfortunately, we're just going to kill the animation department. Disney animation will no longer be a thing. When Michael Eisner and Frank Wells would come in, there was a huge life-changing alteration to the entire company. Things started to change for the better, and not just in the animation department, but all around the entire company. A lot of people would start to say that Walt Disney and Roy Disney were very much like Michael Eisner and Frank Wells. One of them was a creative genius, the other one was a financial genius. And because the two of them working side by side and hand in hand, they would kind of go through and take the entertainment world by storm, both Walt and Roy and Michael and Frank. Now, when all of this power was building up, in 1994, something drastic happened. So Frank Wells, who, if you look at the guy, I always say this every time I talk about him. If you look at the guy, he looks like a finance guy. Like he kind of looks like a nerdy guy. But Frank Wells was actually a thrill seeker. Like he absolutely loved doing thrill seeking things, and he always wanted to have it so he could climb the 7 summits around the world. So if you don't know what the 7 summits are around the world, it is the highest summit in every single continent. So things like Everest, like the actual Mount Everest, would be the one that's over in Asia. In Antarctica, there's one in North America, one in South America, Africa is Kilimanjaro, and Europe as well. So he would go through, and he wouldn't want to go through and climb all 7 of these summits. He went through and got through 6 of them. He never got Everest. And in 1994, Frank Wells would actually go through, and he would get into a helicopter crash that would unfortunately end his life. Now, with this helicopter crash in 1994, so many different things would happen with the Disney company. Now, if you've heard about Michael Eisner prior to 1994, a lot of people will praise about all the amazing things that he did. He did amazing things. It's funny because when you talk about him at the end of his reign with the Disney company being the CEO, a lot of people talk about what a terrible CEO he was and he did terrible things and blah, 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 blah. But prior to that, he did amazing things. Now, a lot of people kind of say that he lost a lot of his creative genius and a lot of his stability when Frank Wells would pass away in this helicopter crash. Also, at the same time, we had a few different people who would be kind of big parts with the Disney company, and one of them would be Jeffrey Katzenberger. I was going to say It's Jeffrey Katzenberger, who would be one of the heads of the studio department of the Disney company. Now, Jeffrey would go through and he would want to be the person who was kind of getting known for being the head of the company. And a lot of people were saying that he was getting too much screen time and Michael Eisner just really wasn't liking it. The two of them would be butting heads a whole lot. And then when Frank Wells would pass away, he would resign from the company and go off to create his own studio, which would be DreamWorks Studio. Obviously, things for like Shrek and different things like that. In addition to that, in 1994, we would start to get more and more of the Disney stores popping up, including the brand new Disney galleries. With these brand new Disney galleries, we were bringing artwork to Disney around the country in art form. So instead of having just your typical Disney stores, you would have Disney galleries instead that would focus on artwork. It failed pretty miserably. In addition to that, we did get a brand new gaming division. Prior to this, we would have different Disney games, classics like the DuckTales game, if you remember that one, the Aladdin Sega Genesis game. Love that game. We also had the Lion King game. There were so many amazing games. But in 1994, or prior to 1994, Disney was not creating these games their own. They were actually having it so different companies would create the games for them and then just kind of slap the Disney name on the title. At this point in this year, in 1994, we will get Disney Interactive, a brand new thing that would focus heavily on creating Disney games all by themselves. On top of that, holy cow, there's a whole lot of stuff. On top of that, 2 years prior, we did get a brand new theme park, which was Euro Disney, and that would be renamed into Disneyland Paris, mainly due to the fact that a lot of people were not going to Euro Disney, and they decided they needed to have a rebranding, and they brought in the name Disneyland Paris. Eventually, it would become a pretty big hit, and a lot of people do say that it goes through and talks about, or it is due to this name change that a lot of more people would come through. Also in 1994, Frank fam, you guys are like making me work for this because there's a lot of things that happened in 1994. But in addition to that, in 1994, a brand new thing would be happening over in Broadway. That's right, we got our first look at the brand new Beauty and the Beast on Broadway show, Beauty and the Beast, which would open up in Times Square, right off of Broadway, near Times Square, becoming another smash hit. And then finally, after all of this, Disney moves forward with a brand new theme park. Now, we have to talk about this theme park a little bit because a lot of people are going to be saying, I've never heard of that theme park. And you'd probably be right because this theme park actually never came to be. In 1994, Disney announced their brand new plans to open up a brand new theme park. This theme park would be Disney's America. It would be set over in Virginia, like the state, just kind of right outside of Washington, D.C., and it would be taking you into a brand new theme park that would focus solely on the history of America. Now, with this idea of focusing on America, a lot of the people that lived in the area of Washington, D.C. said, you know what, we have moved to this area because we love America. Sam the Eagle. And so when these people would go over to Disney's America and they started hearing the plans about it, they said, no, we don't want to have it so there is a theme park over here celebrating America because we feel like Disney is just going to be using it to make a lot of money and not focusing on the educational and the historical values that are actually placed here. Now, at this point, Disney had already started to move forward. They already had purchased a lot of land for this brand new theme park. And when they had moved forward with all this land and now all these people started to get upset by it, they said, unfortunately, we're just not going to be able to do this at all because we just can't. Like, a lot of people were ticked off. And because those people were ticked off, Disney said, you know what, we will take the back seat and we will not go forward with this brand new theme park. So they stepped back and they said, we're not going to do Disney's America, but instead we will donate the land to different areas. So they actually did donate some of the land and they sold some of the land as well, mainly for people who were in need, different military families and different things like that. So they turned something that was being perceived as bad into something good instead. I personally would have loved to see this theme park, but unfortunately, we never got this theme park, and still to this day, it makes me devastated. Okay, I think that's all we have for 1994. Yay! That was a lot for 1994. So let's move on to our next one, which we're just literally going 1 year back in time to 1993. Here comes the grannies. Okay, Bingo and Bluey are here, taking us into 1993. Now, before we get into 1993, let's talk a little bit about some promises that we had from Michael Eisner and Frank Wells, who we just talked about in 1994. But prior to this, they made a grand statement saying, starting in 1988, they were going to have a brand new Disney animated film every single year from 1988 and moving forward. 1993 would be the only year that this would not come true. So in 1993, we did not get a brand new live action film. However, we did get some amazing Disney films still that came out that year. Some of them are some of the most cherished films of all time. Things like Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, which was created by the Disney company, with Tim Burton being the main person. Of course, the film stars Jack and Sally and goes through some crazy stuff, but it is one of the most cult classic films that Disney's ever created, and it came out in 1993. But if you think that's a cult classic, well, just you hold on, because we haven't even scratched the surface yet. Also, in 1993, we got another cult classic, which would be Hocus Pocus. Hocus Pocus tells the story about three witch sisters who were taken back when a virgin lights a candle, and when they lights the candle, they come and cause havoc, and they want to take over the entire city, and they say, "I put a spell on you, and now you're mine." You know the song. But the film was a huge hit, not initially, but again, it had a huge cult following, and eventually it would cause it so there would be a huge comeback for Hocus Pocus back in the mid 2010s when Magic Kingdom would actually create a brand new Hocus Pocus show. And then, in addition to that Hocus Pocus show, they would also have it so they would come out with a Hocus Pocus 2 just last year. But that's not the only films. Now, also at this time, we had it so there was a rising star, which we've already talked about how Tim Allen was a huge star and he had Home Improvement. Also, one of the huge stars from Home Improvement was Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and Disney was right in swooping him up and having it so they can make a little bit of money off of him as well. And with that, they created a brand new film, The Adventures of Huck and Tom. So going through this film, or wait, no, I'm jumping ahead. No, this is the Elijah Woods one. There's a different one with, it's called Tom and Huck. Wrong movie. This one wasn't as good. It was still a good one, but it wasn't as good of a one. It was a very forgettable film because I personally forgot it. So we'll get to that one when we get to that year. I think that was 95, not 93. In addition to that, we also had Homeward Bound, The Incredible Journey. Homeward Bound would actually get a sequel, Homeward Bound 2, Lost in San Francisco. In addition to that, Homeward Bound was actually based off of another Disney film called The Incredible Journey, which came out a few years before. When I say a few years, I mean like 20, 30 years before. Which also, a lot of people have been talking about how there's a lot of different Disney revamps. Disney revamp movies have been going on for as long as I can remember. If you go back to Walt Disney's early days, his original comedies or cartoons / comedies were the Alice comedies, which focused on Alice in Wonderland stories. Then eventually in the 1930s, he would have Mickey Mouse star in Through the Mirror, which would be, again, a Alice in Wonderland story. And then in 1951, we got another Alice in Wonderland story, which was Alice in Wonderland. And then we also had our first TV special in 1950, which would be Alice in Wonderland. So it hasn't just been recent years where we had the same movies coming out over and over and over again. We've had these same stories going on over and over again as well. But that's Homeward Bound, The Incredible Journey was also based off The Incredible Journey. In addition to that, we also had a brand new live action film, which is personally still to this day one of my favorite live action films that Disney's ever created. It's not the most complex film. It's not the most beautiful film. However, it just tells a great story, and that's what Disney films have always done. The film, of course, is Cool Runnings, of course. Like, everyone's like, oh, I know exactly what's going to be. Cool Runnings tells the story of the Jamaican bobsled team who decided to go up and compete in the Winter Olympics. It's not a completely historical accurate thing, but it does tell the story of determination and grit that these Jamaican bobsledders, well, originally runners turned bobsledders, had in mind to be not 100% successful, but to change the hearts of millions all around the world. Okay, that's a lot. And that's just the movies. We got to get into the other things as well. Okay, so also in 1993, we had different things like Winnie the Pooh becomes the #1 character in the Disney canon. I mean, I know prior to this it was Mickey Mouse, and then after this it would eventually become Mickey Mouse as well. But prior to, or at this time, we had it so Winnie the Pooh started to come out and become one of the most popular Disney characters of all time. This also goes hand in hand with a show that came out just the year before, which was The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh Bear, so much fun climbing a honey tree. Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh Bear. You remember the no, I was the only one. My little brother had the VHS tape for it was 3 different stories about Winnie the Pooh, and he was obsessed with the one, which was about Rabbit finding this lost bird named Kessie, and he nursed the bird back to health. And it's very cute, and then it's like awful because you just watch it 50 times a week with your little brother. He's constantly playing in the background, and it was that lousy Kessie. By the end, I was just so sick of that bird. But yeah, my little brother was obsessed with it, and but it's because of that show that Winnie the Pooh would eventually, in 1993, become the number one most sold Disney products in the Disney company. Eventually, like I said, he would be overcome. But Winnie the Pooh did go on a very long streak, starting in the mid 90s, or 1993 to be exact, all the way until the late 90s, when he still had different things like the puppet show going on, and several other things that was coming out. In addition to that, Disney did purchase Miramax Films. And we've talked a lot about how Disney purchases different things throughout the years. We got Marvel, Lucasfilm, so many other things that they've purchased throughout the years, Pixar. But Miramax Films was one of the ones that they purchased back in 1993. And with that, along with Touchstone, which they actually created back in the 1980s, it allowed them to create more adult content and still make money, but not be focused solely on the Disney, or I'm sorry, not the Disney, on the child side of things. Because with the child side of things, yes, they're making money. However, they want to make more money all around the company. And so this allowed them to kind of diversify the business and have it so they could make more money with adults as well. Things that actually Walt Disney wanted to do back in the 1940s and 1950s and never really got to, because the Disney name was, linked to the idea of kids and animated films and theme parks and all that other stuff. And so this allowed them to kind of take a step further, especially because this was before the age of the internet. So when you had things like Touchstone and Miramax, a lot of people weren't really aware that this was actually Disney-owned companies, because they had no Disney association whatsoever on the labels. So they could come out with more and more adult content with this thing. In addition to this, in 1992, we're still in 1993, but in 1992, we got a brand new movie, which took the nation by storm. So in 1993, Disney opened up their very first ever professional sports team, which was the Mighty Ducks. So with the Mighty Ducks in 1993, they would start having their very first games over at the Pond, which is still found over in Disneyland as well. Also, at this time, Disney would open up a brand new nature reserve, which still exists to this day. I've actually never been there. I mean, there's every now and then I'll be thinking about it. I'm like, I should really go down there at some point. But I always think about it at like 9:30 at night. And I'm like, I can't really go down there right now because there's nothing to see. But it is about 15 to 20 miles south of here. And it's a nature reserve that Disney has purchased and put aside. So that way they can continue building things in Walt Disney World. Because when they purchased the land for Walt Disney World, one of their promises was 50% of the land would always be nature reserve for different animals. And this way they could still build things, but also have a brand new nature reserve area for, nature. And that, I think that's all that I have for 1993. So let's cross that one off the list. Ha ha ha. Okay, let's go to the next one. 1973. I believe, didn't we do 1973 last week, or am I remembering incorrectly? No, we did 1963 and 1976 and 1971 last week, but not 1973. I think 1973, is this the one? No, 1973 is the year of like nothingness. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about 1973, but this is going to be a very short trip. It's going to be just as short coming up with one of our next ones coming up here. But in 1973, we got a brand new film called Robin Hood. Now, Robin Hood that would come out would actually be the second time that Disney would go through and tell the story of Robin Hood. We also had a Robin Hood that was live action back in the 1940s. But Robin Hood, or 50s, but the Robin Hood that was found here would be based on different character animals and would have one of the greatest soundtracks of all time, in my personal opinion. Bum, bum, bum. Robin Hood, Little John walking through the forest, laughing back and forth at what the others have to say, reminiscing this and that and having such a good time. Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day. It's a great movie. It's an absolutely amazing movie. But it did get a lot of criticism, mainly due to the critical criticism. It would get a lot of criticism, mainly due to the fact that at this point, the Disney animation was kind of going downhill, was kind of getting to that forgotten stage, and a lot of people just didn't really give it a second look. So when this film came out in 1973, what they did was they did reuse a lot of different animated sequences and just change up the characters. You see this a lot in different Disney films. They've been actually doing it since way back, starting with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Like even in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, there's some sequences that are reproduced from different Disney short films. Now, the main reason they would do this is they would have the drawings already done, and it was an easy way for them to kind of go through and create the same exact scene, but with different characters instead. So mainly they focused around the dancing scenes, because with the dancing scenes, you'd have so they're going through and dancing and stuff like that. In fact, the scene where Snow White, along with Dopey slash Sneezy, are dancing around in the room when Dopey's on top of Sneezy, that entire scene is replayed in Robin Hood, but with different characters dancing around a campfire. So, in addition to 1973, or Robin Hood coming out in 1973, we get a whole lot of nothing. There was not a whole lot that was going on in 1973. Not even the theme parks. We would get a few different little touch-ups, but not a whole lot was going on in the theme parks either. In 1973, I believe it was the year that we would finally see the swan boats disappear from the Magic Kingdom. And when I say finally, I mean it's like literally like 2 years later. So there were a few different changes that were going on. In 1973, we also, now I'm starting to remember some stuff. In 1973, we also got a second boat that would be going around the rivers of America. Now, we all know the Liberty Bell Riverboat. Originally, it was not the Liberty Bell Riverboat that would be found here. In fact, the two boats that are found in front of Magic Kingdom, the ferry boats that would take guests from the parking lot over to the park, at that point were called the Magic Kingdom 1 and the Magic Kingdom 2. And the ones that were actually inside would be the Richard F. Irvine, along with the Admiral Joe Fowler. Now, the first one would be the Irvine, and then the Fowler would come a few years later in 1973, mainly due to the fact that it was a very popular attraction, and they wanted to have it so they could bring more and more people onto this attraction. So they brought in a second boat, and the two of them would go around pretty much at the same time. Now, here's one of my favorite little fun facts about the ferry boat that you can still hear to this day. If you watch my 50 Years, 50 Days, 50 Fun Find series, I'm almost positive that it was the fun fact that you heard on that story about that episode. But in 1973, when they brought in the second boat, when you're going past the Native American village, you hear the whistle of the ship go boom, boom. That sound is actually indicating to the ship that was back at the port that, hey, we're coming back. Make sure that you guys are heading out. So that would actually be the indication that they would have to leave the port because they were coming back to port. Now, they still do this whistle to this day, even though the second ship would actually stop in 1980. But that would be coming in 1973 is when that ship, the second ship, would actually come. Okay, that concludes our 1973. Let's move on to our next one, which is 1984. Hey, Matt, how you doing, buddy? 1984. Now, in 1984 was a year of not a lot. Okay, so 1984 was the year that I was born. So in 1984, we would go through and we would have amazing things like future Disney authors would be born. But that's going to be the screenshot too. I can feel it right now. I don't get to choose the screenshot for the episodes. It chooses just like a single spot when it goes up on YouTube, and that's going to be the one. I'll freeze here for a second just to see if that is what it is. I really hope it is. Okay, so one thing that I always talk about for 1984 is people always talk about which movies came out in the year that you were born that are Disney related. If you go through the history of Disney films, movies that actually came out in each year from 1937 all the way until 2023, every single year except for 2 years, Disney released a film, whether it was an animated film or a live action film. Disney released a film every single year from 1937 until, I'm sorry, not 1937, 1940. So 1937, we had Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. 1938, 1939, and we did not have any films. And then 1940 until 2023, there are only 2 years that they did not release a brand new film. And one of them, unfortunately, was the year I was born, which was 1984. They did release a film, but under the Touchstone label, and this film would actually become a huge film. The film was Splash, starring Tom Hanks. Now, interestingly enough, Splash would actually go on to have an even more popular meaning behind it. Because of its huge popularity in 1984, it would also become the inspiration for the film, or for the attraction Splash Mountain. Now, the actual attraction is not based off the film Splash at all, but originally it was going to be called the Zippity-Doo-Dah River Run, and eventually they said, you know what, we should call it Splash Mountain, because a lot of people would probably associate it with the movie Splash, and they would want to see what it's all about. Now, the reason we're going to be talking about Splash right now is mainly due to the fact that this was also the time when we would have Michael Eisner and Frank Wells come in. So in 1984, when Michael Eisner and Frank Wells would come in, which we've talked a little bit about them when we talked about 1994 earlier, then we would go through and talk about 1984 when they would come in. One of the first things they did, in addition to kind of going through and telling all the different animators, listen, your jobs are on the line, so you better get to work. In addition to that, they decided to go over and visit the different Imagineers. Now, when they went up and visited the Imagineers, they said, okay, give us the ideas about what's going to be coming or what different ideas that you have. And to make stakes a little bit higher in 1984, Michael Eisner also said, here's my son. He's a teenager. You have to impress him. Don't impress me. Impress him. So a lot of the different Imagineers' jobs were on the line, mainly due to a teenager who had to decide whether or not things were cool enough or not cool enough for them. So two of the things that would come out of that meeting in 1984 were Splash Mountain. At that point, like I said, Zippity Doo Dah River Run. And then Michael Eisner said, you know what? Nope. Splash Mountain would be a better name because people might associate it with the film that we just came out this year, which was a huge hit. And then in addition to that, another attraction that would open up over in Disneyland first and then eventually make its way over to Walt Disney World's Disney MGM Studios. And that would be the one, the only Star Tours. So those are the two attractions that came out of that meeting in 1984, pretty much designed for a teenager. Tony Baxter always talked about how he was kind of like sweating at the edge of his seats because he didn't know if his job was going to be in jeopardy, mainly due to the fact that there's this kid who's making all the calls right now. In addition to that, with the opening of Splash, Splash came out on March 9th of 1984. When Splash opened up, it was the very first film under the Touchstone label. We talked a little bit about the Touchstone label earlier, but Touchstone would be the brand new live action division of the Walt Disney Company. And when they created this brand new live action division, Splash would be the very first thing that came out of it. And that kind of set the precedent for how this brand new studio would go forward. And overall, pretty good. Okay, let's continue going through in 1984. What was the other things that happened in 1984? Michael Eisner thing. Oh, okay. And then in 1984, with Eisner and Wells coming in, they were the very first two people who would actually run the company that never actually knew Walt Disney personally. So a lot of people before that, or everyone before that, would have some sort of connection to Walt Disney, whether they worked with him or related to him or had married into the family. But at this point, this would be the first time in the history of the company that we would have it so people did not know Walt Disney personally. Okay, let's move on to our next year, which is the year 2000. In the year 2000. Remember Conan O'Brien? He used to do that skit in the year 2000. I used to love Conan O'Brien. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the year 2000. Now, that's not right. All right, so yes, it is right. So in the year 2000, we got a few different changes that would come through. Now, the first one you would think would be, Fantasia 2000. However, fun fact, Fantasia 2000 never opened up in the year 2000. It actually opened up on December 31st, 1999. So we're going to talk about that when we get to 1999, but not when we talk about the year 2000, ironically enough. It lasted in the 1990s for a single day, and then it eventually opened up. So we're not going to talk about that, but we will talk about the two animated films that opened up that year, along with the live action film that kind of changed, again, the course of the Disney live actions. Now, prior to this, in the Disney live action field, we weren't getting as many of the famous films that we're coming up with for live action films prior to this. Now, if you go back to like the 1970s, 1980s, 1960s, you had a great assortment of different live action films that were coming out. Everything from The Absent-Minded Professor, Herbie the Love Bug, Candle Shoe. That's right, we're going to throw Candle Shoe in there every single time we get. Tron, it's my new hat, by the way. I got this yesterday during the first day of Tron being open. And so much more. We had so many different things that would be opening up with live action films throughout the years. And Disney kind of got to be known as not just an animated powerhouse, but also a live action powerhouse as well, where you would go through and have it so there are so many different things for people to enjoy. Now, in the year 2000, we got a brand new film, which would also kind of set up the next few years of films, live action versions, which would be Remember the Titans. Remember the Titans took the look at a very real story, a very true story, and it helped humanize it and have it so people could watch it and start to understand where different people in the world are coming from. This would actually set up a huge transition for Disney live action films over the next few years, where they would continue to make these heartfelt, true stories come to life on the big screen. And it was overall an amazing way for them to kind of launch it. Remember the Titans, I think, is just a great film. If you've never seen it, make sure you go check it out on Disney Plus tonight after the Wednesday show. Keep watching now. In addition to that, we did get 2 brand new films. Like I said, not Fantasia 2000, ironically enough, but we would get a brand new film known as Dinosaur. It's going to be the first ever Disney film that was completely computer animated. Now, prior to this, we would have it so that we had Toy Story, which came out in 1995, A Bug's Life, which came out in 1998, and then also Toy Story 2, which came out in 1999. But all of those were solely Pixar films, and this was going to be solely a Disney animated film. So in 2000, Disney decided, hey, we're going to dabble in this whole computer generator, computer animated film thing as well, and come up with a brand new film. Now, unfortunately, Dinosaur was not a massive hit like they were hoping that it would be. It did well, it just didn't do well enough. So, so unfortunately, that would kind of be the forgotten film. However, also in 2000, we got another film, which would be a huge hit, a huge cult following, including myself. I absolutely love this film. Boom, baby. That's no touchy. The Emperor's New Groove. The Emperor's New Groove would come out in this year and would introduce the world to 4 of the most popular characters of all time. We have Emperor Cusco, who is a self-spoiled emperor. In addition to him, we would also have Pacha, played by John Goodman, and then Yzma and Kronk. Kronk probably being the greatest henchman in the history of Disney animated films. I absolutely love Kronk. I think he's just absolutely hilarious. And because of the popularity of this film, even though it wasn't a huge hit with the actual audiences at the movie theaters, it became a huge hit among fans. And because of that, and because of the start of the age of the internet, it would actually go off to spawn a few different shorts. A television series which was called The Emperor's New School, and then we'd also get a direct-to-video sequel, which was called Kronk's New Groove. In addition to that, we also had one major change happen. Now, prior to this, we've all heard of Bob Iger. Bob Iger is the current CEO of Disney. Prior to this, he would be working on ABC. He started off as a weatherman, then slowly worked up his ranks to become the president of ABC, which is owned by Disney. And then he would eventually make his way into the Disney company. He finally was actually a Disney employee and not an ABC employee starting in the year 2000, which would eventually lead us into him becoming the CEO just a few years later when Michael Eisner stepped down. And that, my friends, is the year 2000. Okay, let's go through. We might have time for one more. Let's do a quick subscriber update here. Oh, you guys could have gotten so lucky here too. My shorts video today just took off. It was at 388 views when we started the show. It's now at 1.6 thousand views. So usually when I get a lot of those, we get a lot of new subscribers. Unfortunately for you guys, we did not. We did not go up a single one. Not one of them decided to subscribe. Boo. Okay, let's go through. We'll do one more unless we get up to that 2,723rd subscriber. We'll use Matt's here. Matt has 1988. Let's go to 1988. And you guys still have a few minutes left here. So hopefully we get a new subscriber here between it now and then. Also, just because I love looking at this kind of stuff, and I don't really talk about this stuff on the show at all. So I love looking at the analytics. And we'll get rid of this for just a second, man. We'll come back to your thing here in just a second. So these are the analytics for the thing. So this is the last 48 hours. There's been 6,931 views. Obviously, you can see like when things take off. Right now, The bar that's on the far right-hand side is going to be the last 60 minutes. So then if we look at here, you can actually go from the last 48 minutes to the last 60 minutes. And this is going to be just the last 60 minutes. We've had 1,501 views. And then what I like to do sometimes is you refresh. And obviously every minute you're going to have the ones over here drop off. And then the ones over here are going to be going up. So if we keep on refreshing there, so 1,501, 1,503. This is how I determine my breaks at work too. I'm like, I'm not going on break until I hit 1,000 views this hour. And then sometimes I'm on break for like days. So anyways, that's besides the point. Let's continue here. We've got Matt's, which was the year 1988. Let me cross that off here. Let me go back to my notes. So 1988 would be a year that was instrumental in a lot of people's lives, mainly mine. In 1988, I would see my very first animated film. Actually, I think it was my first film ever in the theaters. It's my first, at least it's my first memory of going to a movie in the theaters. I would have been 4 years old, but it's when Oliver and Company came out. And I vividly remember sitting there and watching Oliver and Dodger up on the, what do you call those? The outside the windows in apartments in New York City. I don't know, like with the stairs. I don't know what they're called. The fire escapes. Haha. I do know. I vividly remember seeing that as a 4-year-old. And like, that's one of my earliest memories at a movie theater. That is my earliest memory at a movie theater, is watching that. So we got a few brand new films. We got Oliver and Company, which would come out. We also got Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which would be a partnership actually with Disney along with Warner Brothers. But Disney would actually own all the rights to the film, not all the characters, however. In addition to that, we did have another film came out, and this film actually has one of my favorite little links to Disney history that I just always love to put out there. So let's do the trivia question first. What was the band? And I'm sure I've asked this hundreds of times on here before, so hopefully someone out there knows. What was the band that was the first, or I'm sorry, let me figure out the best way to phrase this. Which band was the first guest ever at Disney's Grand Floridian Resort? That's the way to. What band was the first guest at Disney's Grand Floridian Resort? And it actually goes along with the fact that in 1988, we did get Disney's Grand Floridian would open up. Now, for a lot of people out there who have gone to Disney over the last, 25 years, 35 years, you probably remember Grand Floridian always being there. It does seem like it's just one of those staple resorts. It's probably been there since the start of all time. But Contemporary and the Polynesian were the only two that were originally around the Seven Seas Lagoon. Eventually, in 1988, we would get the third and final, still to this day, resort that would open up around the Seven Seas Lagoon, which would be the Grand Floridian. In addition to the Grand Floridian opening up, we did have another resort open up at Walt Disney World, which would be the Caribbean Beach Resort. Personally, one of my favorites. I absolutely love the Caribbean Beach. That would be found over between Epcot and Disney MGM Studios, but at that point, Disney MGM Studios had not yet opened. Let's see, did anyone get our trivia? No one got our trivia. Oh, maybe. Not in sync. It was the Beach Boys. Round, round, get around, I get around. So the Beach Boys would, the reason why this actually is connected is because under the Touchstone label, Disney would also have in 1988 a brand new film that would come out called Cocktail, starring Tom Cruise. And in Cocktail, one of the songs, one of the most famous songs from it, or the most famous song from it, is Kokomo. Yeah, Aruba, Jamaica, come on, pretty mama. And the actual soundtrack or the actual music video for Kokomo was actually filmed on the beach of the Polynesian with the Grand Floridian in the background. I'm not even joking about this. YouTube it later on. Just YouTube Kokomo music video, and you'll see the Beach Boys with John Stamos actually being the drummer in the video, and Grand Floridian is actually behind them because John Stamos actually worked with the Beach Boys on multiple occasions. Still to this day, he plays as their drummer from time to time. But that's besides the point. So when they would film that thing, one of the things they asked them was, do you guys want to be the first people ever to stay at this resort? And they said, of course we do. So the Beach Boys would actually be the first people ever to go through and be these people staying at that resort. Um, in addition to this, let me find my notes real quick here. In addition to this, we had it so a few different projects were getting close to completion, but we'll get into those in 1989. But there were going to be two big additions to the Disney name or the Disney locations in Walt Disney World that would open up the following year. So a lot of construction was going on at Disney that year, kind of like how construction is pretty much going on all the time at Walt Disney World every single year. The other big milestone that would happen up this year in 1988 would be the very first time ever in the history of the Disney company where we would actually have it so the Disney company would be the number one company in the box office for the entire year. Now, that's kind of mind boggling because from 1937 to 1988, that's 51 years. So in 51 years, they were never the number one box office throughout the entire year. So that's all of the films that they created together would be number one. And then if you look at all the other companies around Hollywood, there's so many big names out there like MGM and different things like that. They would always be number one and taking over for 51 years. Disney just never could crack that top spot. In 1988, they would, and they would actually continue to be at the top spot multiple times throughout all the years, including like last year and the year before that and the year before that and the year before that. Pretty much ever since they acquired Pixar and Lucasfilm and Marvel, they just kind of own the box office now. So that is the year 1988. Okay, let's go over here and see where our subscriber count is. If we have gone up one subscriber, we will continue on to another year. Otherwise, this will be continuing on to another time. And it looks like we are still at that 2,722. So, on that note, as always, I'd like to remind you that tonight's episode is sponsored by It's All About the Mouse Travel Jazz Hands. Make sure you stop by. It's allaboutthemousetravel.com for all of your Disney travel needs. All their services are absolutely positively 100% free. So make sure you book with them for your next Disney vacation. Before we go here, we are going to be coming back to you live with another one of these Disney 100s. I'm kind of thinking maybe next week, but if not next week, in 3 weeks, because in 2 weeks, for sure, we're going to be doing a recap of the Springtime Surprise Weekend for Run Disney, and we won't be doing the other. Everyone's coming on right now. Hey, Gary, how you doing? But yeah, we'll be doing our continuation of the Disney 100 sometime possibly next week. Let me know. Okay, well, let's do a vote right now. If you guys want to have it so next week we go through and do another 6 or 7 years of the Disney 100 series, let me know in the comments below. Or if you would rather have it so we wait 3 weeks until we do our next one, let me know in the comments below as well. And this will be the determining factor on whether or not. I still hang the McDonald's ornaments on the tree each year, Oliver and Dodger. That's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. Hi, Gary. Backstreet Boys. No, Backstreet Boys were founded, and the only reason I know this is because one of my friends is a massive Backstreet. Actually, I have two friends, both ironically from Detroit, who are massive Backstreet Boys fans, and I think they started I know for a fact it was April 20th. I want to say 1995. I could be wrong, but I think it was 1995. But I know it was April 20th for sure because my one friend, her birthday is April 20th, and she brings it up every year about how she was born. That she shares a birthday with the Backstreet Boys. So yeah, Backstreet Boys were founded a few years after that thing would be done. I think NSYNC would probably be right around that same time too. Yeah, the Beach Boys. Yeah, tonight, make sure you go search for that, the Kokomo video. All right, we got people coming in next week. So next week, it looks like we'll probably do it next week. No one's saying no against next week. So yeah, we'll do a continuation next week of our 100 years. I'm going to go back to my friend Louie and try to figure out what's going on with the chat room. I wonder if he's even still sitting around. I hope this guy writes back to me soon. Okay. But thank you everyone for joining us once again this week. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, if you have not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you're checking out our videos every single day too. Make sure you give them a like, a comment, and also sending them to people. I don't know what the emotions are, but we're sticking to the emotions. Make sure you keep on spreading the word about the Wednesday show and from Screen to Theme. Invite anyone and everyone for them on Facebook, or if you're not subscribed, make sure you send your friends over to subscribe as well. My friend who I met up with today at the park, he said that before I got there, he was sitting on a bench talking to a guy while eating scallops, and he was saying you should subscribe to Brent Datch. And I hope that's a true story, but that's what he told me. So Tony, if you're out there, not my friend's name is Sean, but he said he talked to a guy named Tony. So Tony, if you subscribed, hi Tony. Uh, now we're giving the random shout outs to people meet on park benches. Uh, but thank you everyone. As always, remember that anything can happen if you let it. Until next time, have a great week, everybody. Bye bye. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Bye bye now. Goodbye. Bye bye now. Are, are they Are they gone? Are they gone? Oh, good. My cheeks are just killing me. I just can't.